The following is a presentation of the Six Arrows Radio Network.
MTCRadio.com presents Ham Radio 360, the podcast. Brought to you by Elecraft. Now, here's your host, Kel Nelson, K4CDN.
Welcome back in. It's episode number 82 of the Ham Radio 360 podcast. We're into 3 years or so of this, and welcome in. Hope that you enjoy your time here. If this is your first time through, like I said, we've been doing it about 3.5 or so years. Got a big back catalog we invite you to give a listen to, as well as a couple of spinoff programs, one being the Workbench Show. It airs the opposing Tuesdays as this program. It's a deep dive technical discussion, building, making type amateur radio show. And launching Thursday, just in a matter of days, the brand new Field Radio podcast with John Jacobs. It's going to be cool. I'm really excited about it. And matter of fact, we're going to talk to John here in a couple of minutes on Ham Radio 360. Now, this program is brought to you by sponsors. You heard it there at the very beginning of the program. Main Trading Company, Elecraft Radio, they've partnered with us to help bring you this program. We're excited about that. And I want to tell you that Main Trading Company is one of the finest places in the country to do business if you're looking for amateur radio equipment. Yeah, they have it all, of course. They have new gear, used gear, and the entire Kenwood line. If you're, like I said, many times before, if it's a single band handy-talkie or if it's a flagship, humongous, nicer than your wife's car kind of HF radio for your shack, they've got it. And they've got the best prices on the internet and on the planet. So call Richard, Christine, let them know that you're looking for some gear. Let them know that Kel sent you, and they will be tickled to help you find the best price on anything Kenwood. That's mtcradio.com. Call them. Let them know you're looking for something today. Yeah, so we got a big special announcement this time through the Ham Radio 360 podcast. With me, you've heard him on before. We were talking ARES and emergency communications. His name is John Jacobs. He is from the state of Utah. His call is Whiskey 7 Delta Bravo Oscar. John, welcome back in to the 360 show.
Thank you very much, Kel. Great to be back on. I got on that episode and got on with a little bit of Dayton, and so sounds like I might be a regular with our announcement here.
Well, I hope so. Yeah, we the call went out before Dayton, and the conversation happened at Dayton, and it looks like we've birthed another 360 branded type program, and it's going to be John's baby. John's going to be steering the boat on this one. It's going to be Field Radio Podcast. And this is one of the ones, a lot of people may not know this, but when George and Jeremy and I sat down at Dayton 2 years ago, and they pitched an idea of a secondary show, my call was, let's do a QRP-type portable operations show, and they were more into the smart guy show, the deep tech thing. And that was the birth of the Workbench. And so a year later, lo and behold, here we are getting ready to launch a QRP field radio show. John, what do you have in mind for this program? What's been going on through your head as you've been kind of ramping up and getting ready to launch this thing?
Well, when we first met at Dayton, my idea was an MCOM, ARES, RACES, deep dive into that world. But then I kind of took a step back, especially going around Dayton and watching and seeing everything that's available out there. And I started thinking, ARES and MCOM is a result of field radio. It's what you do with your equipment, but why not take a step back even further and get a bigger view and say, let's look at taking your equipment out of your shack and putting it in the field, because that always adds a layer of complexity. And some people find that it's actually more enjoyable of a hobby to be in the field versus in the home. And so that's where we kind of thought about doing a field radio podcast where we really, the first 10 episodes really dissect radios, batteries, laptops, antennas, accessories, all with the eye towards you're going to put this in the field for whatever purpose. It might be your contesting or SOTA or MCOM or your ARES group or whatever you want to do, or special event work. And so really take a look and take the opportunity to dissect, I guess, this part of the hobby.
Yeah, that's one of the things that is kind of could be intimidating to folks who are coming in and kind of wanting to try that end of the spectrum. Even with me, I mean, I've been doing the podcast for 3 years. I've got plenty of contacts I can make if I have questions and need answers for something, but there's still sometimes it's like, wow, do I really just throw a wire up in a tree? Or do I really need 100 watts when I'm out on the trail? Or, is it realistic for me to do PSK 31 portable? So I'm really excited to have you join us here. Now, and guys, this is the coolest thing. It's going to be the Thursday following this show. That's right. We're shooting for the launch on the 13th, so you're listening here on the 11th, and we'll be launching around the 13th, which is going to be totally cool. And there's nothing like having a lot of ham radio podcasts to listen to. And, of course, we've been going weekly now with the Workbench over a year with George and Jeremy. Now we're going to be adding the Field Radio podcast into the same week as the 360 show, and it will be followed by the Deep Tech show, the Workbench. So welcome into the family, man. We're just really excited to have you here and just really looking forward to what you're going to put together for us. I know that you've spent a lot of time. I mean, you've been a ham for quite a few years, and your dad was a ham. Your dad is a ham, and your granddad, and your granddad was a ham.
Yeah, so it's been in our blood since 1956.
Wow. So you guys have been there, done that, have a couple of T-shirt kind of a thing.
Plenty of event T-shirts.
So, we don't want to spill out too much here as we get ready to launch the program in just a matter of days. But you said the first 10 shows you've already kind of got laid out, and you've kind of painted a picture in your mind what you're looking to do. Is this going to be an interview type show? Is this a John with his opinions and experiences? How are you going to set the program up?
I think it'll probably evolve as we go. Initially, what I want the first 8 or 10 episodes somewhere is I really want that to be a go-to, like a reference or an evergreen that has when someone wants to talk about battery in the field. It's a show that's got some interviews blended in with some monologues, I guess. One thing I want to do is if you're in the Aries or RACES or MCOM world is when you have your nets, weekly nets, there's always a training item. And I've been doing training items for my local nets for quite a while now. And so I kind of got a library of that. So probably one of my segments is just going to be my training item for the week. And it'll be something that will provide the text document, and people can take that back to their regular Aries group and maybe improve on what I've said and use that to propagate out some of these ideas.
Well, that's cool. I just, before we began recording this program, I was involved in our local Aries net. I really wasn't looking for a position, and I'm involved now. So, you do this podcast, and you have all these smart people on your show, so everybody thinks that you're the smart person. But once you really listen to the program, go back and listen to the show. I'm the one asking the dumb questions, right? So I'm grateful that you'll be providing that. Is it just batteries? Is it just, operating at the campground? Or is this going to be 1 week you're talking about working in your local EOC and doing WinLink kind of stuff? I mean, give us a little taste of what we can expect.
Well, there's a lot of experience out there, and that's really where I hope the listeners will come forward and say, we're doing this with our Aries group, or we're doing this special event this way, and this is how we manage a special event. And so once we get past those initial getting you set up for field operations, that's where I hope the show goes. Is I would like to take a look at, and I've heard some on other podcasts, and they've been really informative about how down in California the groups handle their, they have actual disasters quite often.
Yeah.
Or hearing about some marathons back east and how they operate. And so that's what I'm hoping for, is it becomes after the setup episodes, it becomes a dialogue that we can all start sharing and providing information. And it might just be contesting and of course the biggest contest of all, Field Day. We'll definitely do a very big ramp up to that, multiple shows getting ready for Field Day, and then after Field Day doing some after action like George and Jeremy just did.
A lot of people may be like, oh, that's not my thing. I'm not into emergency communications. Or someone else may be saying, man, I'm really not into going out in the woods with my radio and toting a battery with me. I hear you saying both of those things at the same time. So it's not just a man-pack green radio kind of show, and it's not just an Aries guy sitting in an EOC. It's virtually operating outside of your shack. You're going to talk about it and feature it.
Correct. We're gonna stay at that high level that we're just going to assume very few things. One, you're not sitting in commercial power and commercial air conditioning, and you may or may not have access to Google. So that's where we're going to take it, because I learned that really fast the field day trying to set up my logging software. I'm like, if I could just Google this question right now, I could get this thing running. And so that's really where we want to take it is and there's a draw that is a natural draw for, I think, all of us to be outdoors. Mm-hmm. I think it's something in it's in our DNA or our persona that we gravitate to the outdoors, and maybe it's just that you're out camping, and once you get set up and you get the dinner on, you finally realize, hey, I actually have some time that I can do something. I don't have to go out and mow the lawn, or so why don't I take my radio with me and just get a little radio time in before dinner.
Yeah, so I tried that on July the 4th with the KX2 and the new Chameleon antenna, and I was sweating more than I was making contacts, and I came back in the house.
Yeah,
I'm a fall and spring and winter guy. I'm not a summer. I don't know how I've lived here my entire life, and still I don't appreciate the warm weather. I guess it's because I've never maybe lived in Utah, but it's one of those things that I'm really interested in all of that. I really want to get out and play radio and to make it happen outside. And I've done that in the past, here in the yard with the TS50 and whatever. But I've never really gotten serious about it. And this is one of the reasons I'm really excited about your show is because just like I'm not really the workbench builder kind of guy, but that show has helped me progress through some things that I was curious about and wanted to know more about. So since that's happened, I'm anticipating the same thing, learning through your program and your experiences about getting on the air outside of the shack.
Yeah, and that's the fun thing is we all know that ham radio is magical, and we can have someone sit down with us in our house and say, look how we're able to talk maybe just over the mountain or around the world just on this technology, and there's nothing in between you and I. But you take that out on the field and it just becomes even more magical. My friend Chris, he has a F10 or FT857D and a Chameleon mill whip antenna. He's up at a scout camp in our high Uinta mountains here, makes a 6,800 mile contact with New Caledonia at a campground on 20 meters at night.
On a whip
with some ground wire.
Wow.
Now that's just like, that's journal entry time there. That's amazing.
Yeah.
That it's amazing you can do it in your home, but you're sitting up in the woods where you don't even have a cell phone connection and you're talking to New Caledonia, and all the boys were sitting around the radio and all of them were trying to reach for their phone so they could Google where New Caledonia was. And they couldn't. So they had to ask him.
Yeah.
And he's in the South Pacific, and that's the magic of radio, and that's when you get the spark, especially with the youth, when they can see something like that happen. And I wish I could get that far. I haven't gotten that far of a DX contact. My farthest mobile has been Hawaii.
Well, that's not close either. I mean, that's a nice contact for you for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Well, hey, we're going to take a break, John. We'll be back in just a moment. We're talking about the brand new release of the brand new show. It's the Field Radio Podcast. It's happening this Thursday, the 13th of July, and we are excited about it. John's going to be hosting it, and we're going to be talking more about his show. Coming up, stick around right here. You're listening to the Ham Radio 360 Podcast. One of the coolest jobs that I know about right now belongs to my buddy Gerald, KF5JNU. You've heard him here on the program before. Spent some time with him on the phone just the other day. He was telling me about going up in the airplane for his job, and he spends time. His job is radio communications related. I really can't say any more than that, but I can tell you this. When you're at 28,000 feet, you can hear a lot of stuff. And you know what he's up there using? That's right, folks, his Air Spy. He's in an airplane, 28,000 feet above ground, and he's got his AirSpy connected to his laptop, listening, taking pictures, screenshots. It's amazing what it'll do at 28,000 feet. Let me tell you, it's amazing what that SDR will do right here on the farm. Check out airspy.us for SDR radio and components. Yeah, there's not just the dongles. They sell everything you need to get to listening with SDR radio. It's airspy.us. All right, we're back with John. It's Carlos Whiskey 7 Delta Bravo Oscar. We are anxiously awaiting the release of his new podcast, Ham Radio 360 Podcast. That's right, it's Field Radio Podcast. Totally stoked about it. There's a tab now on the Ham Radio 360 site. You click that one, takes you to the show stuff there, as well as there'll be an outside web page that you can visit as well. John, what's the web address, the URL that you're using for the show?
So we're going to be right at the hamradio360.com site. Because that just has a wealth of information. And so we're just going to say, go to hamradio360.com and hit that field radio link. We're also going to be we're on Twitter. Okay. So I'll start doing some tweeting. And that's at Field Radio Pod because you can't get any more letters in. And then we're gonna run some Facebook. And so that'll be on you can find that on just at Field Radio Podcast.
Cool.
Because Facebook allows you more characters.
Yeah. And as well, you're on the contact page now for Ham Radio 360, and they can email you at john@hamradio360.com.
Yeah, and that's where we're looking for show ideas. We're looking to crowdsource this show. I want to just bring on people that have some experience and a story to tell. You've done such a great job with that with the 360 podcast. You really learn this hobby by just listening to other people's experiences.
Well, the thing about it is that we've all got someone we probably consider an Elmer, a mentor. But after listening to 80 some odd episodes of the 360 show, just for instance, you've got 80 some odd Elmers that are very specific to a very specific thing. I could ask my Elmer, hey man, can you help me with APRS? And they look at you like you got three heads. That was 1984. We don't do that anymore, kind of a thing. So, yeah, finding Kenneth was like a godsend. And I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that feel the same way about all the different guests we've had and how they've spoken into their hobby, their parts of the hobby. That's really cool. And thank you for the compliment there. But that is one of the things that I really wanted to do with this program. And I'm excited that you're going to be doing the same thing as well there on the Field Radio Show, is to learn from everyone else. Now, you and your dad have been involved, like you said, your family goes back to the 50s as ham radio operators. Give me just a little taste of what your grandfather was into when he was into the hobby.
So my grandfather, he originally had the call W7 DBO. He started in '56 with N7 DBO because that's back when the novices would have a different call. So he got his call, and then my dad, WA7 ZBO, he got into the hobby after that, and so I grew up in the hobby, running around at field day, running around at local events, and then I could just never get past the code. I tried at many ham fests, taking that 5 words per minute, and so man, the minute they dropped that code, I was there. And ironically now, I really want to learn code. I want to get a KX2, but I think I want to get the KX2 as a reward for learning Morse code. Nice. So that's kind of my goal right now, and I'm a general class licensee, and so I got to get my extra too. But that's gonna come along too. But so I grew up in the hobby, and my dad did a lot of work in ARES or before there were ARES, and a lot of state emergency response, and so it kind of been in the life. But my grandpa, he was a CW guy, and I remember in where he lived out in Erda, Utah, he had a wall full of QSL cards that were in these special holders, and they were just layers and layers and layers thick. He was an AM CW guy, 80 meter, from what I remember of him, and he literally had a shack that sat at the base of his antenna, and he would go out there and fix radios, and he was retired Army. So he was a World War II vet, and he was a radio technician for World War II. So yeah, it started with my grandpa, and it led me to where I am today.
Is your dad involved in the MCOM Aries thing like you are?
Yeah, he is. He's more involved in that than I would say. I'm not sure if he's done some contesting, but yes, he really is into the MCOM. He was the first back when there weren't cell phones. He was the first in our area to step up and say, why don't we use ham radio operators for this March of Dimes event or this marathon? And so he's an ARL lifetime member, and so he's been really involved in that, and with our church, he's involved with helping training operators in that area too. Cool.
Now your dad is really big on fox hunting, so I guess you would have to say he's nearly a fox hunting celebrity. Is that a safe thing to say without him being here to get mad at me for calling him that?
Yeah, locally he's always loved the fox hunt. It's always something you do at Hamfest. We went down to Orlando for Hamcation, and he packed his antenna and he was ready to go. And unfortunately the event kind of fell through there, but we were out at Dayton and he's out there, of course there was kids running full sprints that won.
Yeah.
But yeah, he loves a great fox hunt, and he loves being tricky about it. We just did a fox hunt at our local Wyoming, Idaho, Montana, Utah Hamfest, WYMU. And so the one that required driving, he found, those push-up poles that you put a flagpole on.
Yeah.
For like NASCAR events or whatever. Mm-hmm. He planted one in the front yard, and he found out that you can get a roll-up J-pole to stuff up in that quite nicely. So that was the antenna, was a flagpole. And another time, he went and took the fox hunt repeater and put it out at the police academy, and just set it next to all the other cars that had antennas on it. And so he likes to be pretty tricky where he hides his foxes.
Now he and I talked about having him come on a show and chat with us. Now, I'm going to go ahead and claim that before you try to get on your show and just kind of spill all the fox hunting beans. I really need to get with your dad before he makes his debut over there on the Field Radio podcast.
Yeah, definitely get him on there, because he's got some good history behind him of that whole hobby, and it is a great. And that's one thing the fox hunt ties back to so many things. It can tie back to a contesting. It can tie back to MCOM. You got some guy talking that doesn't know where they are. They just know they're there, mm-hmm. and they're stuck. Or it just might come back to some turkey tying up the local repeater and everybody getting out there direction finding and figuring out where that's at. So fox hunting is kind of once again, it's wide across the hobby.
Yeah, we need to get him on the books. I kind of teased that he's coming. I thought we might have him this time through, but we've got Jamboree on the air, the internet on the air, and, of course, the release coming up of the Field Radio podcast here in just a matter of days. So, if you will, tell you that I'd like to get him scheduled as soon as we can to have him here
definitely.
with us. Yeah, absolutely. So, John, before we let you go, man, but besides just I'm excited because I love seeing things like this happen. Had no idea that the workbench would turn into what it would turn into. They said 10 shows to start with. It's 27, 28 now. I'm excited for you. We're looking for some great things to come out of this program, and just to encourage people to do more with their radios. I think that sometimes we kind of get stuck in a rut. When I first got in the hobby, I thought that my thing would be just near vertical instant skywave, talking up and down the East Coast. Well, I did that in about 30 minutes one day. And then I made, I got a JA contact on a random wire. That was really cool. I played in some contests. I've done some field day stuff. I keep coming back to building up infrastructure here in my local county just because there's really not a whole lot of that outside of repeaters. But there's just so much that we can do in this hobby. I think that we've just started scratching the surface of that with this program, but really excited to where you're going to take us with the Field Radio Show as you get our radios out of the shack.
Yeah, there is definitely some untapped knowledge base out there, and you've been able to tap into it, and the Workbench has through their show. And so that's what I'm excited about this show is I'm excited to see who comes forward and provides, maybe it's just a 5-minute story about how they run an event or a Go Box idea. You look on the Facebook and you just see all these people building these boxes, and they're just great stories behind each one. And so we're going to kind of dabble in a little bit of everything.
Cool, man. Now we're going to get some of the Go Box ideas that you come up with and you use in your Comms to Go stuff.
Yeah, definitely. So I've started 3D printing all my panels. And so as part of that process, I've been kind of documenting my library. And so as we get into boxes, and hopefully I can get Jeremy and George on the show and kind of talk about that in their last episode, kind of really their desire to get back into finishing their boxes. So I really want to take the knowledge that I found in the boxes I built and share that knowledge, and not only that, but share the 3D printing library. So there might be some crossover with the Workbench.
Oh my goodness!
And we might end up doing a build together.
It sounds like I've just started spinning a web here. I had no idea. Well, man, we're totally stoked about it. We'll have the links to your show in our show notes, of course. I'll be there first episode with you for just a few minutes as you kick it off. I'm just stoked about it, guys. Don't forget, in just a matter of days, it will not be in the normal RSS feed, okay? So you're going to have to find it in your player. We're going to make that as easy as possible so you can search in your player, your iTunes, your Pocket Cast, Podcast Addict, whatever you're using, Overcast, whatever. Just type in Field Radio, and you should be able to find it there without any problems. Of course, we'll have the links in our show notes. And, John, we're just excited for you, man. Can't wait to see it get started, to hear what you've got to say, and hear who you're going to bring in there to help us learn more about the amateur radio hobby outside the shack. Man, thanks for being here with us.
All right, thank you very much. Please subscribe.
Oh, yeah. Don't forget subscribe, review, and all those cool things. All right, thanks again, John. His call, by the way, is Whiskey 7 Delta Bravo Oscar, and we'll be back here in just a few minutes on Ham Radio 360. So on the most recent episode of the Workbench podcast, it was a field day follow-up. George and Jeremy talking about what worked best for them. And then it got off a little rabbit trail there talking about portable radios, and George was just completely enamored by his KX2. Still is. He's got the 3, he's got the 2, and he says the 2 is the one to use if you're going out and making portable contacts. That's the one I have here. Thank you, Elecraft. And I'll be using it throughout the summer into the fall as I'm learning about QRP radio. Really excited about that, and it's a great rig. I mean, think about having the power of the HF bands in something about the same size as a nice paperback book. You're looking for something to get out of your shack with. You want to make some field radio contacts? Check out my friends at Elecraft.com. It's hands-on ham radio. It's Elecraft.com. Talking about field radio, how about Boy Scouts and radio? It's still a big thing with them, and we want to welcome into the program Jim Wilson, Kilo 5 November Delta, to chat with us all about scouting and ham radio.
It's great to be here with you, Cale, and looking forward to talking to your audience about amateur radio and scouting.
You know, we've talked about the Jamboree on the Air. We've talked about scouting and radio a couple of times, but this is always a great time to come back and remind our listeners that they have a couple of different ways to help amateur radio grow in the youth today. And one of the best ways, I think, is with the interaction with the Jamboree on the Air and scouting over ham radio. Tell us a little bit about the Jamboree on the Air, when that happens, and what we can expect as operators if we're not going to be actively involved with a local scouting troop.
Well, Jamboree on the Air, and now included is Jamboree on the Internet. It happens the third weekend in October. It's been happening the third weekend in October for 60 years now. This year, that happens to be the 20th, the 21st, and the 22nd of October. So it starts really on Friday. It starts Friday local time. It's not like a contest. In fact, it's not about making contacts. It's about conversations. Ideally, it's scout-to-scout conversations, but for the most part, it's conversations with anybody. So we like amateur radio operators to get on the air. Ideally, they're working with a troop or a scouting district or a scouting council. But if that's not possible, we need people on the other end of the conversation as well. So it's get on the air. There are some scout frequencies that are designated, and those can be found K2BSA.net under IOTA lists the frequencies, and so that's a good place to go. And then also another good way is tune around the band. These days, it's probably 20 meters, and listen for high, squeaky voices. Those will be the scouts.
We've all been there, right? I remember those days, and thank goodness that passed. Now, let me give you just a little taste of my experience as a scout. I was up to Weeblo, and then I didn't like the brown and green uniforms, and that's why I didn't go back. But never had any interaction that I recollect regarding amateur radio in Cub Scouts, and that may be why. But it was kind of a ragtag little group anyway, but it always intrigued me as a kid, the radio thing did. So I know that even with the advent of the cell phone in the pocket, toting around a computer that can do more than it took to launch, the rockets back in the day, do you, with your work with Scouts, are you seeing a desire for these young boys, young men to connect this way, or is it like a novelty to them?
Yeah, well, it's probably all of those things. It is a novelty to them. I'll mention Jamboree on the Air and Jamboree on the Internet is actually the largest scouting event in the world. It's over 1 million scouts that get on the air, but it's not all that well known in some parts of scouting in the U.S. We have, just as one example, we have some ham radio operators approach, they'll listen to me or somebody else talk about it, and they'll approach councils and say, hey, I want to set up a station, get you guys on for Jamboree on the Air. And the scouting folks will look at him like, you want to do what? So it's not surprising to me that you didn't experience it when you were in Cub Scouting, but I will mention this. At the beginning of 2016, there was a new requirement for the Weeblos award, and that's attend Jamboree on the Air, Jamboree on the Internet. Wow. So there was this explosion. Minor explosion, if you will, but a lot of parents, a lot of scouts were saying, hey, how do I get my son involved in this so that we can check off the requirement? So a brand new level of interest started happening around it.
That's very encouraging, and actually it's kind of cool that they're making them do that instead of just pretending or just kind of passing it by. I'm really familiar, I guess you would say, because, I'm a ham radio operator, so it seems to me that Jamboree on the Air makes a lot of sense. One of the things that I've never really grasped is the Jamboree on the Internet. What is that about, and how does it relate to the Jamboree on the Air?
Yeah, I've experienced that question myself. I'm actually on the World Jamboree on the Air, Jamboree on the Internet team that operates the event for the World Organization of the Scouting Movement. And I guess maybe I'll back up a little bit in the answer to that question to emphasize what the goal is for the event. The goal isn't about amateur radio. It's not about internet. It's about connecting scouts. And it's about connecting scouts across countries and across different cultures. So it's meant to be, hey, I'm living in this big world, and there's a lot of different kind of people out there, and I can talk to them. And and then the other part of that is that the other goal is that they start to recognize that they're part of a World Scout movement. And there are lots of youth around the world connected by these mutual goals. So when we consider it from that perspective as ham radio operators, we go, wait a minute, what about the radios? What about the technology? Right. And so we tend to look at it through our lens and say, gee, the scouts need to use radios and antennas and all that sort of stuff. Well, it's really not the case. It's certainly one of the side benefits. They connect with amateur. It's the introduction to amateur radio for them within scouting, and they can connect with it. But it's really about reaching around the world. And so if you look at it from that perspective and bring the internet into it, that's really pretty easy to do. You can post Skype videos. You can use social media. There are some chat channels. Scout Link is an organization that operates chat rooms for scouts, internet chat rooms for scouts to get on and talk with one another. And they're moderated. Unfortunately, some moderation works and some doesn't. I've heard about some bad experiences there. So you do have to, just internet safety kinds of things. But and then in the course of the Jamboree weekend, there are a number of activities that you can engage in. One of them is called Jam Puzz. It's a bingo type of a game, and you collect numbers from other Scout stations, either on the air or on the internet, and fill out your bingo card. Now, I'll mention that every country in the U.S. Has its own Scout association. And some take Jamboree on the air and Jamboree on the internet very, very seriously. Netherlands, for example, is one that a huge percentage of their scouting population is involved that weekend. In the U.S., not so much. It's improving, but it's still not widely known.
So this isn't just what some of us would consider scouting being the Boy Scouts of America. I know there are other scouting groups out there, and they're invited as well to participate in this event?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
It's the event itself is owned by the World Organization of the Scout Movement. Their headquarters is in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, and they authorize scouting in other countries around the world. And they operate the World Jamboree and a few other events as well. But so yeah, it's scouting in other parts of the world that you're ideally connecting with.
I got you. You're from Texas. Is that a correct assumption?
Yep, I'm from Texas.
So when you guys do your Jamboree on the air, are you making contacts, HF, VHF? How are you connecting the scouts just locally when you participate via radio?
Most of my typical participation is writing heard on social media and things like that, trying to, from the perspective of the world team and my U.S. operation. But I visited a lot of the operations. National Scouting Museum used to hold a very big event. They connected HF. They had HF stations on single sideband. PSK was popular. That's very popular with the Scouts. They can connect with that and say, wow, this is just texting.
Right.
That's what I do. They tend to lock up a little bit with the microphone. We call it mic fright. But if you give them a little bit of a script, once they get engaged, they do pretty well with it. But that operation also had VHF and UHF. They used repeaters so they could, if the HF wasn't working well, they had some connections there. They did some satellite passes as well, which is very popular. In fact, that particular location couple of times had scheduled contacts with the International Space Station during the Jamboree on the Air, Jamboree on the Internet weekend. It's what you want to set up. One thing that I will mention, the greatest success in operating for Jamboree on the Air, if you want to engage the Scouts, is to go where the Scouts are. We have a lot of guys, and some of which are successful, that say, hey, we'll open up our ham radio club and we'll invite the Scouts in. And the problem with that is everybody's calendar is so busy. So it's hard for Scouts to get there and fit it in. It's not impossible. I've witnessed some of those. They'll have big rushes in the middle of the morning, big rushes in the afternoon, and it's quiet the rest of the time. Mm-hmm. But ideally, you're working with the Scouts to set up a big camporee on the weekend of Jamboree on the Air, and you're set up as a station there, much like Field Day, and it's one more activity for the Scouts to get engaged in, and the Scouts are already there, so it can work very, very well that way.
Excellent, excellent. Now, I know that here in my local area, we have a Girl Scout camp that I don't know a whole lot about because I've never been a Girl Scout, but I'm assuming as well, going back just to reemphasize this is open to the Girl Scouts, the Boy Scouts, and it's broad enough for everybody. You know, a lot of us, when we think scouting, we're just, the Little Rascals episode or, something like that. We get that in our mind. But it's really a worldwide, interconnected event where we're trying to, like you say, connect these young people in an alternate method, potentially, than they're used to connecting to each other with.
Exactly. And at the broad level, where Girl Scouts are concerned, they belong to the World Association of Girl Guides and Girl Scouts. And at that level, there's a memorandum of understanding or an agreement between the World Organization of the Scout Movement and the World Association of Girl Guides, Girl Scouts to cooperate around Jamboree on the Air. So it is open. It is open to Girl Scouts.
Nice. Excellent. Well, there's another opportunity, I guess we could call it, to share the magic of ham radio as well. I know locally, again, we have a communications trailer for our amateur radio club, and they towed it out to a facility where at least one group of scouts come through, and we've had I've been on the repeater and talked to kids before, which is just like talking to my kids. It's great. I love hearing those young voices on the air. One of the things that I've thought about, and you mentioned it just a moment ago, is the repeater scene. And maybe, we've got some time here. It's at the, near the end of October. Maybe this would be a good time potentially for groups to maybe coordinate with another amateur radio club in a particular, a different county or a little different geographical area, that you can still communicate with repeaters to kind of set up a potential sked if you have problems with HF that day, to not just leave the kids hanging talking to, old Catfish over here on his, armchair station. You could potentially say, okay, Club A will be on this repeater, and if HF goes down the tubes, we'll let the kids talk back and forth on the repeater. Does that kind of stuff happen during Jamboree on the Air?
Oh yeah, it happens that way with schedules, HF, VHF repeaters, what have you. And I'll also mention it happens just with handy talkies, where they're going through the demonstration station, they're tuning across 20 meters, all they're hearing is noise, and they'll just send somebody with an HT around the corner to talk to the scouts. Nice. through another HT. It's they can be very creative just making those contacts, because there's also some of them will put on Radio Merit Badge workshops as an example. And one of the requirements for Radio Merit Badge is that you have a 10-minute QSO, and when all else fails, pull out the handy talkies and make it happen that way.
Wow, we're talking Jamboree on the Air, Jamboree on the Internet with Jim Wilson. His call is Kilo 5 November Delta. We're going to take a break, but we'll be back in just a moment. You are listening to the Ham Radio 360 podcast. Again, this year, you hear the reports coming in from field day for folks operating from dusk till dawn over a course of virtually 2 days. The ICOM IC7300 continues to prove itself as a winner. I'm telling you guys, it is probably one of the nicest, most affordable radios right now. Whether you're a beginner ham or you've been around a long time, if you're looking for something to get yourself on the air, maybe you're a brand new licensed general class licensee, you want to reward yourself, check out the IC7300. My friends down at Main Trading Company, mtcradio.com, will give you the best prices available. That's right. Call Richard. Let him know. You heard about him here on the show. mtcradio.com. Pick up your ICOM IC7300 today. And we're back with Jim. His call again, Kilo 5 November Delta. I've got to ask you, again, going back to my days, this has been, I'm thinking, close to 35 plus years ago as I was a scout. I never did the Radio Merit Badge, which is kind of funny. My dad was a phone man. We probably could have done it pretty simply if we would have just tried. But where's the Radio Merit Badge at nowadays?
Yes. Well, it would have been quite a bit different back 30 years ago. There would have been a Morse code requirement. And I think it was might have been 10 words per minute at that time. It could have been 5 way back. It started actually in 1918 as the wireless merit badge. So pretty nifty name that actually still fits. But or maybe it was 1914. Yeah, I think that might have been 1914. It started as wireless merit badge and then became radio merit badge in the 20s. But I asked the statistical department back at Boy Scouts to, how many people are earning this badge, and they were able to go back through 1949, and it was typically between 700 and 1,000 were earning it every year.
Wow.
And I kind of expected it to be tapering off, maybe losing some interest. But what happened instead was in the early 90s when Morse code started being dropped from licensing and et cetera, they dropped that requirement as well for the radio merit badge. And so it started climbing. And now it is in the 6,000 and 7,000 range every year.
That's incredible.
So that was really nice to see and to discover. And then what I also discovered is that from the perspective of a scout, there are only 2 kinds of merit badges. The first kind of merit badge are those badges that are required for the Eagle Scout rank. The second type are easy merit badges. And radio merit badge, frankly, is an easy merit badge. In fact, I'll mention that the Jamboree is coming up on the 19th of this month. We teach the radio merit badge there. We typically get our goal 300 to 400 through. We start the class every hour on the hour. So a scout that shows up and is interested doesn't have very long to wait. They spend 90 minutes in a classroom, 30 minutes in front of a radio, another 90 minutes in the classroom, and they finish the radio merit badge. So in really less than 4 hours, they can earn the radio merit badge. Typically at local scout council, it's a day class, or they might do a spread over several evenings. I'll also mention, Cale, that we've recently updated the requirements for the badge. We had some things in there like some circuitry and component identification that was was already in the electricity and electronics merit badges. So we dropped that so we could spend some more time with modulation and explaining modulation. We also talk about cell phones, about that's a radio you've got in your pocket. How does that work? Why doesn't it work during disasters, and why ham radio can come into play? And then I'll also mention there used to be just 3 options for completing it, 3 special areas of study, if you will. One of them is amateur radio, and another one was shortwave listening. And another one is radio broadcasting. So you could select one of those 3. And our impression is that most of them selected amateur radio because that's the easiest one. But at the beginning of 2017, we added a 4th. We added amateur radio direction finding or fox hunting to it. So, yeah, which to my mind is a perfect match with scouting. It's outdoors, you've got an antenna in your hand, and you're running through the woods. How much better could it be?
Yeah, and it may be even easier to read than a compass. I'm just saying.
That's right.
I remember that day of the compass class. Boy, that was tough as a little kid. Before we get out of here, I want to ask you about the Jamboree coming up in just a matter of weeks that you're going to be teaching these classes at. Tell us a little bit about that before we go.
Sure. Well, and also I realize there's a couple of things that have changed within Scouting regarding amateur radio that you wouldn't be aware of either. We've actually introduced 2 new patches. And if you're familiar with Scouting, you know that nothing happens without a patch.
Yeah.
So these 2 new patches are really pretty cool. One of them is the Morse code interpreter strip. And there are interpreter strips that a scout or a leader can wear on their uniform. Now, typically on that strip, it says Espanol or one of the languages. It can even say American Sign Language. And there's some tests that you need to do to verify that you can speak, say, Spanish, and you sew that on your uniform, and a scout can see that at a gathering and go, oh, hey, here's somebody that can help me out. I'm not understanding what's being said. They know Spanish. Maybe they can help me out. Mm-hmm. Well, there's the National Radio Scouting Committee approached the Awards and Insignia Committee at the Boy Scouts and said, we think you need a ham radio patch there. After all, it's kind of a different language, isn't it? They considered it for a few weeks and sent us back a note and said, well, we thought about it, but ham radio really isn't a language. Then we said, wait a minute, what about Morse code? Let's go back and look at your application. And no, it didn't mention anything about Morse code. So no, this isn't approved. About 30 minutes later, they had an application for a Morse code interpreter strip. And about an hour later, they approved it. So it's 5 words per minute. And it follows the same requirements that any of the other languages require. It's sending a message, receiving a message, and those sorts of things. And it's in the same language that you would expect it to be. It's in dots and dashes, and it spells out Morse. And if you have 5 words per minute, you can sew that on your uniform.
Oh, that's excellent. That is really cool.
It generated a huge amount of interest at the beginning. It was second only to Espanol in the number of patches that were sold. I'll also mention, though, that we eventually got approved that original request, and there's the amateur radio operator rating strip, and that goes on one of the sleeves of the uniform. And if you have a license, you can sew it on your uniform. And so what that set up for us is Jamboree on the Air is an introduction to amateur radio. Some of the scouts get interested. Some of them go, well, I don't know. But those that get interested start considering the Radio Merit Badge. So once they take the Radio Merit Badge, it's another similar investment of time to get that technician license. And all along the way, they have a patch that they can sew on to their uniform. There's a Jamboree on the Air patch, there's a Radio Merit Badge, and now there's an amateur radio operator rating strip that they can sew on as well. So it works pretty slick.
Yeah, and it's not like you're not giving them an excuse to participate, because I remember those days, and those patches and strips that was like gold to a young man.
Exactly. Very much so.
Excellent. Excellent. So give me the dates again, if you will, for Jamboree on the Air and Jamboree on the Internet that's coming up in October.
Yeah, it's always the third weekend in October, and this year it's the 20th, 21st, and the 22nd, Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Excellent. And if we're a local group or a local operator, would it be best to just contact our local council, or if you're in church with a scout leader, is it just an easy approach like that, or is there an application? What's the best way for us to contact someone to offer ourselves to help for Jamboree on the Air?
The very best way is to check with your ham radio club. What are they doing? They may already be doing something. Next is, do you know somebody who's engaged in a scout troop? That's a much easier entry of working with a scout troop, maybe getting your club involved, helping them with a camporee or something like that. That can be much more of a personal connection. I do hear from a lot of of ham radio operators that try to reach out to a council. Now, a council, for example, here where I'm at in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, we have the Dallas Council and the Fort Worth Council. They're massive operations. And so you knock on their door, and sometimes they'll know what you're talking about, and sometimes they won't. And it's really hard to make the connections. And I'll also say that we have a calendar on the website. The go-to website is k2bsa.net. Lots of resources for Radio Merit Badge, for Jamboree on the Air, etc. Or scouting.org/JOTA. Another excellent resource for Jamboree on the Air. But we have a calendar on there that starts in January, and a big event is in May when they're planning their fall campouts, and you want to line up that campout with Jamboree on the Air, Jamboree on the Internet weekend. So as we get here into the summer, scouting is actually, even though they're going to summer camp, is somewhat slow, and the fall really starts kicking it off. But ideally, reach out to a troop. That would be your or a pack, a troop or a Cub Scout pack.
Excellent. And, if you're one of those guys that just doesn't like your own grandkids, this is probably not going to be your cup of tea, because it's, 15 or 20 kids who aren't your, yeah. So if you don't like kids, Jamboree on the Air is probably not your thing, I guess is what I'm trying to say in a very politically correct way. So to me, it's one of the coolest ways for us to share ham radio, especially with those out there that we think are never going to have an interest in this hobby. Here is the best way for us to kind of plug them in.
Very much so, and I'll just mention there. I call it planting seeds. Sometimes they're going to grow right away. You can see those scouts. Their hair catches on fire. You can't get rid of them. They're in the station. They want to just be on the air all the time. There's others that'll just go, well, whatever. And there's some that don't want to be engaged at all. But it's still planting seeds. 10, 20, 30 years from now, they'll go, hey, I've got some time finally. I'm through college. My career is, I'm kind of there. I need a hobby. And they'll start looking at it. Or I like this one too. They'll be sitting on the board of your homeowners association, and you'll be asking if you can put up an antenna. And they'll go, wait a minute, I remember ham radio. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So, they're not actively involved. They don't necessarily want to be, but at least they know what it is.
Yeah, and it does have so many resourceful uses in everyday life, in emergency situations, and just a fun hobby and a great service as well. So, Jim, thank you for all that you do to help keep this going for the scouting community. And, of course, thank you for being here with us on the Ham Radio 360 podcast.
Oh, you're welcome. And let me mention another opportunity that's coming up. Sure. On the 19th of July. The National Scout Jamboree will be on the air from the Summit Bechtel Reserve in West Virginia. There'll be about 30 or 35,000 scouts there, another 9,000 staff members running the operation. It's a huge, huge deal. The K2BSA station will be on the air. We have 40 staff members that are running that station. We will get 3,000 scouts through that. At the 2013 Jamboree, it happens every 4 years. That's the number that went through our demonstration station or introduced amateur radio. So what we need is people on the other side of the conversation. So get on the air. There's a lot of resources online. We'll be publishing our frequencies live. We'll be posting some videos. We actually have a contact with the International Space Station scheduled, so you'll be able to watch that. Lots of things happening around the National Scout Jamboree, and we could use you on the air on the other side of that conversation, talking about what it was like when you went through the Radio Merit Badge.
And give me the date for that one more time.
It's July 19th through the 27th.
Excellent. Okay.
Visitors are welcome, and I can send you a link to the visitor thing.
Excellent. Well, we appreciate you being here with us, Jim, and thank you again for your work with the scouting community and spreading the magic of ham radio.
Oh, you betcha. Happy to do that. Thanks so much for hosting me, Cale, and delighted that we could present more information for your audience. And I know many of them are already engaged in Jamboree on the Air and teaching Radio Merit Badge. But for those who aren't, come on in, get started.
So thanks to John, thanks to Jim, both of you guys for coming on. John, we're really excited about your show. Again, it launches on Thursday. Find the links in our show notes to get yourself prepared to take that show in any of your podcast players. It should be showing up already now. You can find it. Just look under Ham Radio or type in Field Radio. You'll find it there. John, congratulations and good luck with your new show. We're excited to be there with you, my friend. Jim, thank you very much for sharing with us about Jamboree on the Air and the big Jamboree coming up in just a matter of weeks. We're excited to make contacts with those young men and women as they get on the air. And guys, it's another great example of what we can do as amateur radio operators to encourage the newer generations, the younger generations, to find their place in the hobby. You know, it may not have been how we got started, but it's not necessarily the worst way to encourage youth to get on the air. So again, thank you both. Again, a big shout out to all of our patrons who have signed up to support the program at patreon.com. There's a link there on our site. It's like an orange circle with the letter P in it. Thank you for supporting. Click it if you'd like to be a part of that. Thank you very much for helping keep the program going here. Again, don't miss out the Field Radio show this Thursday, and then next Tuesday we've got another Workbench episode. Always a great time here at hamradio360.com. Love hearing from you. Thank you so much for listening. God bless every one of you in 73, y'all.
Thank you for listening to the Ham Radio 360 podcast, brought to you by Main Trading Company, Paris, Texas, and by Elecraft.com, hands-on ham radio. To learn more about the show, visit our website, hamradio360.com. 73s, y'all.